Hello there, people, and welcome to another episode of Flightbox. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me. You might have noticed that this particular episode is dropping on a Saturday instead of a Thursday. Why is that? Well, it's because Ray got the schedule for Peacemaker Season 2 a little off. I am here today to talk about Episode 1 of Season 2 of Peacemaker as we begin our 8-week-long journey weekly into talking about this particular series, because got to stay up on this one for a number of reasons. But I believed originally that it was going to drop on a midnight, like, you know, every other show has done so far. Maybe I shouldn't have assumed, right, that it was just going to be the same as what Star Wars does, the same as what Paramount does with Star Trek. No, this was actually a 9 p.m. Thursday night release. So that means that when everybody was doing the live tweeting and the live posting with James Gunn, the live watch parties for the first episode of Season 2, I was asleep because I had to work in the morning, right? And then, on top of that, and this is going to be difficult as the season goes on, it was a case where I got up and I had to, craftily avoid threads and really social media in general for basically the entire day, because I had no idea how loaded or not that first episode was going to be with any type of Easter eggs, spoilers, whatever, and I couldn't risk it. So that's why I wasn't very active on threads. I posted a couple of videos on TikTok, but they weren't related to Peacemaker at all. I was just trying to steer clear and stay in the bubble just in case there was anything massive and spoilery in that first episode. I didn't even want to know small spoilers, and I'm glad that I did it that way, but that's going to be a challenge. That is going to be a challenge every Friday from here on out, to stay away from social media and notifications for social media. This is where following James Gunn and having all the notifications turned on for all of his posts is a bad thing. Because, and I give him credit for the most part during that watch party, he was putting stuff in spoiler tags, but the stuff he was posting today, as we approached 24 hours of release, there's some stuff he actually posted today that I'm going to bring up in this particular episode of the show that I really want to reference because of some of the online conversation and the bad faith arguments that I'm not surprised to see on social media regarding this particular episode. But yeah, seeing notifications for that, it was like every time I'd see them pop up on my phone until a couple of hours ago when I finally watched the episode. I was just swipe, hide. I don't want to read or see any of it. So yeah, it's going to be tough sailing for me in the next number of weeks as we go through this series. But it's necessary in order to stay in the bubble and enjoy it as uniquely and as originally as I possibly can. But either way, that's what I'm here to talk about and to start our Peacemaker conversation. So going forward, any episodes of Flightbox that talk specifically about Peacemaker and are dedicated and devoted to Peacemaker Season 2 will drop on Saturdays. They will drop on the weekend. They obviously will not drop on Thursdays because I'm not staying up on a night before I've got to work and watch the episode at 9 and then record a pod at 10 or 11 and get 1 or 2 hours of sleep. Nope, that's absolutely not going to happen. So it'll be a next day thing as far as me watching the episode and then reviewing it and recording the episode and posting that on Saturday. So stay tuned for that particular schedule, and it may also allow me to continue watching Strange New Worlds. In fact, it will allow me to keep watching Strange New Worlds and post new episodes with respect to that show, new episodes of Flightbox that is reviewing that show, Season 3 of that series, on Thursday. So on some weeks, we may end up getting a double dose of Flightbox. That'll be cool, right? At least I think that'll be cool. But either way, stay tuned for that schedule change. Hope everybody is okay with that. And of course, you can find Flightbox along with all of my other shows, the Flightcast on Tuesdays and Flight Chat on the weekends at theflightcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts, whether it is Apple Podcasts, whether it is on the Flightcast YouTube page, whether it's on Spotify, Pandora, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can find all of my musings and all of my nerd talk about movies, TV, and other assorted media, and your feedback as well when you send in your emails and your posts that we have a grand old conversation about over the weekend. And don't worry, just because this particular episode of Flightbox is posting on a Saturday does not mean that we will not be having a Flight Chat. We most certainly will, because I'm sure many of you have thoughts, those of you that watch this and those of you that are thinking about anything else with respect to the future of the DCEU and how James Gunn is positioning it with yet another one of his entries, if you will. And also want to take a moment to thank all the supporters at patreon.com/theflightcast. Believe it or not, as of the time of me recording this particular episode, I'm going to record this, get my thoughts out, and then I'm going to record an episode of Friday Flight for the patrons. Friday Flight is one of the two shows that is available for both flight crew and flight officers on Patreon. The other show, of course, being Flight Speed, which is the show that I record in my car on the way home from work that drops on Mondays, and then Friday Flight, of course, drops on Fridays. That's just, get the thoughts out for the week and what's top of mind, what specific rant or what specific situation I want to get out. But recently, I've also been I did another episode the other day of my ranting show called Sun Just Don't. And if you weren't privy to my thoughts on the whole Jeff Snyder from the In Snyder, aka Chattanooga FBI, declaring war on James Gunn over his Scooper Madness career being threatened existentially. If you want to hear my whole unhinged, not safe for work rant with respect to that, you can go ahead and subscribe to patreon.com/theflightcast. Sign up to be a flight officer. Those episodes, Sun Just Don't, and then the other bonus episodes of Flight Box and Flight Report, which is the comic review show that I do, and Flight Review for movie reviews. Those are available to flight officers. The flight officer tier has that. In addition to the Flight Speed and Friday Flight episodes that are available to the flight crew members as well. But thank you to all of you who have been very loyal subscribers to Flightcast Patreon, and hope that you're enjoying all the bonus content that is there and the bonus content that is to follow indeed. All right, let's get into it. Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 1, The Ties That Grind. First, I'm going to talk about my thoughts on the episode and then dive into some conversation around the episode and get into some things that James Gunn said today because he was posting up a Storm Run threads. And there's one big thing that I absolutely wish to cover in this particular episode with respect to the very disingenuous bad faith conversation and the assumptions that are being made that he personally debunked in that regard and really took the piss out of, to be honest with you. But as far as the show itself, let me start by saying this. Peacemaker Season 2, the vibe of this show, from the beginning, has been something akin to Doom Patrol. Although, for those of you who watched Doom Patrol, back in the DC Universe days, and then eventually on HBO Max, I never finished that show. I still need to watch the 4th and final season. I watched the first 3 seasons of it, and that show at the time was probably the most irreverent DC series I had ever seen. It probably still is. It probably still goes places that Peacemaker is just not going to go. But with respect to imagery and with respect to vulgarity and with respect to being a very adult series, yeah, I mean, this is clearly the most adult content that is in the DCU to this point. But, it's interesting because I've talked with friends, mutuals, I talked on Vodka Stream, talked with Scott and Dave and others with respect, and Phil, with respect to James Gunn's, sensibilities as a creative. And to me, in many ways, Peacemaker kind of shows his range, right? Because here's the thing. James Gunn, I think, from a demonstrative standpoint, whether you like his films, whether you like his work or not, I think he has displayed the capacity to make 4-quadrant films. Because Guardians of the Galaxy, that entire trilogy, is pretty 4-quadrant, right? It's a family type of film. And I realize that there's irreverent humor in it. And I realize that, especially in the second movie, there are some jokes that the kiddies are just not going to get. I understand that, right? But as far as a heartfelt, comedic sci-fi trilogy within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it hits on all cylinders and obviously was very popular with the general audience. It's probably is, if it weren't for the fact, in fact, it might even still, I'd have to look at the numbers on this. I'd have to add this up. But I think even if you count the $1.2 billion that Iron Man 3 made, I think the Guardians trilogy is still the most successful trilogy in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I know somebody's going to say, well, what about Captain America Civil War? And add the $415 million that Brave New World made. And perhaps, but you also got to remember that I don't think a single Guardians of the Galaxy film made less than $800 million, right? And I'm just talking about from a dollars and cents standpoint in terms of popularity, right? Because that's all box office measures is popularity. So we know that James Gunn knows how to make films that appeal to the general audience. And look what he's just recently done in rebooting Superman, right? So 4-quadrant films and appealing to a wider span of the general audience is definitely within his wheelhouse. And then he can also do the adult stuff that is clearly rated R or TVMA, or no, in this case, TVMA/rated R/ going forward into the boys territory. And make no mistake, even though the boys is definitely more irreverent than Peacemaker, Peacemaker tries to come as close as it possibly can without necessarily treading directly into the boys' territory. And mind you, I'm still a season or 2 behind on that, and I haven't watched any of Gen V either. I know the list is the list. There's too much shit to watch. I digress. My point is, is that Peacemaker is a very adult show. And he makes no bones about it, and he told everybody on the red carpet, he said, listen, Peacemaker is the direct follow-up to Superman, but it's a very adult show. It's not going to be the same tone. And the one thing I have to do is definitely commend him and give him credit, because, some directors can't find another gear, right? Like, the fact that James Gunn can write and direct a film like Superman, that is a very 4-quadrant Superman film that appeals to the vast majority of the general audience and has actually gotten people who were not Superman fans before to now be Superman fans. One that has a ton of heart, and even though it's got some lowest common denominator jokes here and there, nothing nearly as raunchy or as irreverent as in Peacemaker. The fact that he can do that and then turn around and give us a second season of a wholly irreverent show that still has the heart and still has some of the more emotional moments in it that really, strikes a balance. The fact that he can, go in both directions, not a lot of directors, not a lot of writers, not a lot of creatives can do that. And I want to give him credit for being able to do that. And then going forward, going further, I should say, with respect to how critics talk about the balance between the irreverent humor and the irreverent scenes and the dramatic stuff, the emotional stuff. Yeah, we're seeing that continue. We saw that in season 1, and that was what surprised a lot of us about season 1. I think that initially our shock value was, okay, we know what James Gunn is. We've seen the Guardians trilogy. We've seen the Suicide Squad at that point. We have an idea of what he's going to do. And then Peacemaker season 1 comes out, and it's like, oh, you know what? I wasn't necessarily expecting that level of emotional depth and that level of complexity with respect to not only Peacemaker's character played by John Cena, but also the rest of the 11th Street kids, right? Everybody in Harcourt, Adebayo, Economos, and Vigilante, Adrian Chase, like just seeing the level of emotional complexity that each of the characters have was like, wow, okay, was not expecting that at all. That surprised us in season 1 for sure. And going into season 2, it looks like they're picking up right where they left off. Or are they? Well, this is something I'm going to talk about later. But, I will admit that one of the few things that I did see before watching the episode was I saw one screenshot. And the reason I saw this screenshot is because one of you responded to these people. And I don't remember exactly who it was that responded to this individual. But I will say that, in my opinion, way too many of you were responding to bad faith actors about Snyderverse and whatnot after this came out, because one of the big conversation pieces has been about how, the Snyderverse is now officially completely dead. And I realize that a lot of the people that are saying this about Peacemaker season 2, they're saying this because they think it will shut up the Snyder cultist. It will not. And they're not smart enough to realize that it will not. But I think we should be smart enough to realize that this is bad faith stuff. Somebody quoted, and I don't remember which one of you it was, but somebody quoted an individual who screenshot the redone ending scene. Remember the scene from the last episode of Peacemaker season 1, where after the Project Butterfly stuff was resolved and he's carrying Harcourt out, from the wreckage, and the Justice League shows up. Remember that controversial setup, right? Where like it was a stand-in for Wonder Woman, it was a stand-in for Superman, it was a stand-in for Aquaman and the Flash, but they actually did record a sequence with Ezra Miller and Jason Momoa as far as the whole fish sex jokes and all that, like that punchline that was going through season 1, right? Like, remember all that? And remember the day after that, the Batman actor posted his stuff on Instagram and everybody was upset because, you have the Batman actor there and what's James Gunn trying to do? Yada, yada, yada. This was before we even knew the DCU was going to be a thing. This is before DC Studios even existed. It's amazing that it's already been that long. Well, he's now given us the DCU version of that sequence. And I'm going to repeat that because we're going to go over this later. It's the DCU version of that sequence. And in the DCU version of that sequence, it's obviously not the Justice League. And since I forgot to say this earlier, this is a great time to remind you, spoilers, this is not a spoiler-free review, this is a spoiler-filled review. But yes, obviously, it is not the Justice League that was at the end of that sequence, it's the Justice Gang. So, Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, Hawkgirl, and Mr. Terrific, accompanied by Superman, and then one other floating character off to the right. And at first, I couldn't figure out who it was. When I didn't pay attention to that image, I just saw what that was. Someone posted that image and said, the Snyderverse is officially dead. And it's like, who is arguing this? like, at all. Like, what? Why are you trying to needle the Snyder cultists that aren't listening to you in the first place and are just coming up with bad faith arguments the same way that you are? Whatever. One of you quoted that, and I saw that. So when that sequence came up, I figured, okay, maybe this is in the beginning. There's some type of recap, something going on. And sure enough, there's a previously on the DCU, which I think Gunn did inform us was going to be the case. And so, yeah, that's a redone sequence. And in this redone sequence, where, it's a catch-up of what happened in that final episode, there's that point where Adebayo, in season 1, she says, why don't you just call the Justice League? And of course, now it's changed to call the Justice Gang, right? So now this is clearly the DCU version, and I couldn't figure out who that person off to the right was, and then I thought about it and remembered, oh yeah, her movie's coming out next. That's Kara, Supergirl, right? So 2 Kryptonians plus the Justice Gang showed up in the DCU version of this sequence. And instead of the fish jokes between Aquaman and the Flash, it's a poop joke, I think. A puke joke. Pardon me, that's what it was. A puke joke exchange between Guy Gardner and Hawkgirl, right? So Nathan Fillion and Isabella Merced, of course, right, reprising their roles from Superman. So here we go, connective tissue. Awesome. I like that he did this. I do. I like that he did this. And I like that he literally said previously in the DCU, right? He did that. So like this retcon argument that I'm going to literally destroy later is already destroyed because it says previously in the DCU, not previously in the DCEU. Nothing has been retconned. This is a multiverse. People acting brand new like they don't know what a multiverse is, that's how you know they're bad faith actors. That's how you know they're bad faith arguers. That's why you should ignore these people and block them en masse. Anyway, I digress. Point is, I liked it. I really liked that he did that. And if that's something that he's going to continue to do throughout the show with respect to anything that we saw in season 1, then it just further highlights why I wasn't worried about canon. Why I'm not concerned about, well, I gotta listen to a podcast in order to find out what's canon, what isn't. No, I don't. I can watch Peacemaker season 2, at least so far, and all the questions will be answered for me. And pretty clearly, right? I mean, we had to figure that the Justice League was not going to be the same. Because obviously, in Superman, we have established there isn't a Justice League yet. There is a Justice Gang, corporately funded by Max Lord, who we saw briefly played by Sean Gunn at the tail end of Superman, and now we see him like further portrayed here. And we knew this. We knew there was going to be a sequence where we saw Maxwell Lord, played by Sean Gunn, flanked by Nathan Fillion's Guy Gardner and Isabella Merced's Hawkgirl, right? We do see that for sure. Further world building with respect to the DCU here. But that's the point, is like, this is the DCU. And James Gunn has been very upfront about the fact that in the DCU, as far as Peacemaker is concerned, there are certain things that happened very similarly in this DCU to what happened in the DCEU. That's his explanation, and that's all I really need. Whatever gaps he wishes to fill in, whatever things he wishes to tell us, he's going to let us know, and so far he has. Because what does he maintain? He's maintained that Rick Flag died at Peacemaker's hands, which is why Rick Flag Sr. is out for vengeance now that he's in charge of Arcus, and he's got Economos watching him at his home, waiting for him to screw up so that he can bring down the hammer on him, right? He knows this. He doesn't trust him for that reason because he lost his son at his hands. And that goes all the way back to the Suicide Squad. So we know that that through line comes all the way through from that movie. And there's a thing that he said earlier on Threads that I absolutely want to bring up because, boy, does that give me some hope about a certain other person that I really, really, really want to return, or really want to come over, I should say, into the DCU in that regard. But we know that that's a through line. We know that Peacemaker still killed his brother when he was a kid, and he still killed his racist father, Augie, when he was an adult in season 1. So that has all still happened. The Butterfly Project all still happened. There were just little changes, like the Justice Gang instead of the Justice League, here and there, right? So far, and we'll get more details on this, obviously, through the next 7 episodes, but so far, most of season 1 still happened the way we saw it in the DCEU. There's just slight changes with respect to how it actually happened in the DCU. So you didn't see a retcon, you saw a different version. And again, I will address Gunn completely 1000% confirming what I just said later on in this episode. But I like that saga cell, and I like where we're at with respect to that particular balance. Because again, for all the people that were complaining, oh, it's nepotism, Gunn's just going to keep everything that he already created. Yeah, he is. And there's a reason for that. because quite honestly, when we talk about the Suicide Squad, when we talk about Peacemaker season 1, that was at an era in the DCEU where it was the Walter Hamada show and everything was disjointed and going in different directions anyway. The DCEU, as far as its original plan, was already dead. It was already defunct. It was already destroyed. After Justice League, everything changed. So quite honestly, he's got a lot of latitude to keep his own projects into and bring them in to the DCU proper, where they will fit tonally and where they will match what he's doing. Because again, he's maintaining the tone that he had in Peacemaker season 1, and it also carries through from the tone that he established in the Suicide Squad. And there's no reason that those tones can't fit the world that the Superman movie lives in. It's just not 4-quadrant. It's just adult. Perfectly okay with that. And when we talk about the balance between the emotional moments and the humor, yeah, that maintains here, right? And the emotional scenes, obviously, in this first episode were what I really connected with and what I really enjoyed. And there's 2 in particular, right? Well, really 3 in particular, but 2 of them involve Peacemaker, and then the other involves Harcourt, because I think that those are the 2 characters that are going on the biggest journey. But to be clear, we get updates on all of the 11th Street kids and how shitty their lives are at this point in time. And they're all different levels of shitty, and they're all handling it very different ways. In Peacemaker's case, he is really excited about auditioning for the Justice Gang. And he goes in for that audition, and basically, without knowing, without them knowing, I guess Guy was playing a trick on Maxwell Lord, and basically, fixing the audio board. He got the security guard to hook it so that when he thought it was muted and he thought that Peacemaker couldn't hear the shit that they were talking about him, he actually was hearing all of it. And it's a sobering moment because, and this is where when people want to say, when there's an argument out there, people say, well, John Cena is one of the better actors that come out of wrestling. Yeah, I think the only wrestler turned actor, I should say, that is better than John Cena at this point is probably Dave Bautista. And that's because of the other stuff I've seen Dave Bautista in, including Dune and Blade Runner 2049, right? I haven't seen John Cena quite go there. But are either of them better actors than The Rock? Yeah, they are. And in this case, Cena, he's got to pull off the vulnerability because he's really excited. He really wants to do well, and he really he's come prepared with his spiel and all of his stats on what will make him a valuable part of the Justice Gang, and he's a joke to them. He's absolutely a joke to them. They don't take him seriously at all. None of them do. Lord is bored by this process. Guy is not even remotely interested in it, and Hawkgirl is not even paying complete attention to what's going on, and it's not even a question of him sensing this. This is direct. And I think one of the most telling things about this is when he reveals to them that he can hear everything that they're saying, and then Guy starts busting out laughing, and Lord is legitimately not happy that he heard everything. He really did want this to be an actual screening process. He didn't mean to feel the way that he felt, and he turns around to apologize, and Chris is gone. Peacemaker is gone. Why? Because he's embarrassed. He's that dejected. He's that destroyed. And he immediately goes back into the car with Adebayo and is like, that couldn't have gone worse. And that's when the anger and whatnot comes out, and the lowest common denominator, the jokes and the one-liners come out from him. But he's distraught. He's distraught and defeated and depressed. And the only one that is in a worse condition than he is in is Harcourt. And Harcourt's in a far worse condition, to be honest with you, because, now in the wake of everything that happened with Project Butterfly, in the wake of Adebayo, exposing all of Task Force X's, no good deeds, if you will, right? In the face of Amanda Waller, her mother now being up, for congressional hearings and whatnot, she has sought fit to blacklist Harcourt and Adebayo from working for any of the agencies. And she's in there with that psychologist, and it's an intriguing scene to me because he accuses her, or basically diagnoses her with symptoms of toxic masculinity. And I think that for the vast majority of people, when you hear the phrase toxic masculinity, you immediately think, oh, well, that's just a man, right? That's only applicable to men. And this scene shows, no, it most certainly is not. It absolutely can apply to a woman, and Amelia Harcourt, without question, exhibits all of those traits, storms out of that office after, she's being asked to be escorted out of there, knowing she can't get hired, and then nearly busts her knuckles, actually, no, completely busts her knuckles, bloody, in her car on her damn dash. I mean, just violent, she's searching for rage and an outlet to release her pain. And to me, the bar scene later, now that is a sequence where, and I've seen this in movies and I've seen this in shows, that is a sequence where typically when they want to describe or display a man that is going through, that not just the toxic masculinity, but also the self-destructive phase where they just want to feel pain and they're just looking for a fight. Like, I've seen that portrayed by men so many times, and this is the first time that I've really seen it portrayed. And I'm not saying that this hasn't happened with women characters before, but this is one of the most brutal ones I've seen where it involves a woman. She went in there looking for a fight. Dude did catcall her. Dude did deserve the clap back that she gave him, but she was looking to kick his ass, and she was going to kill him. She wouldn't stop slamming his head into the ground. And, I mean, she's throwing cue balls at guys' heads. I mean, she is looking for pain. She is looking for a fight. And she got one. And, they get the better of her because it's like 4 or 5 guys now. And basically what it is like she's roughed them up enough that it's not even a case of they're going to like kill her or do anything like that. They just throw her out of the bar. But they throw her out of the bar bruised, bloodied, and broken. But she also kind of gets that grin where it's almost like she feels better. Like she got the rage out. Like she needed to release in that regard. At least that's how I saw it. Maybe other people interpret it differently, but Harcourt is on a very, very self-destructive path to start this. I think that arguably she is in the worst condition mentally, and psychologically of any of the 11th Street kids at this point. Like even in a worse condition than Peacemaker is. We'll get back to him in a second, but you see where she's at. They show you where Adebayo's at. She can't make rent, because she can't get hired, so her girlfriend has kicked her out. She's in a Motel 6 somewhere, or as Economos called it, the worst level of Grand Theft Auto, which I thought was a funny joke. I thought that was hilarious. Economos is the only one that's like, okay, he's not really in a great position, but he's still working. The problem is he's working for Rick Flag at Argus, like I said earlier, monitoring Peacemaker, and it's a shit job. He doesn't want to do it, but he really has no choice. He's kind of stuck there. He's the company guy that found a way to stay with the company, but now he's in a quandary because he finds some shit that Chris is hiding, and he really doesn't want to rat him out, but he kind of has to because it's his job, and he doesn't want to lose his job. He doesn't want to get fired. He doesn't want to get blacklisted, just like Adebayo and Harcourt have been blacklisted. And also Adrian Chase Vigilante, who's working off at a fast food restaurant or some family restaurant or whatever, and he's like kind of in the most delusional state. Like he's all enamored with his lack of owl knowledge. He thinks he knows everything about owls. He turns out he doesn't know shit about owls, right? Like he's just kind of in Delulu land. And I hate that I just said the word Delulu because apparently one of the dictionaries, just Cambridge Dictionary, I think, just officially put that in the dictionary. Oh my goodness, hell in a handbasket. Whatever. I digress. My point is that Adrian Chase, aka Vigilante, is off in his own world, if you will, trying to make the best of how his situation ended up. Harcourt's destroying herself. Adebayo is trying to stay happy but not doing the best of jobs while she's in that Motel 6. And Economos is stuck as the company man. So they're all not in great positions at this point. And we see that very clearly. But when we get back to Peacemaker, the fact that he has access to these 99 doors, like this dimensional gateway that his father was in possession of, right? And he stumbles onto a gateway to a multiverse where his brother is not only alive, but also fighting evil, like as a superhero with him and his father. And that whole sequence where he's there and they think that he's there, Peacemaker, they think that he's there, Chris, and just the love and the adoration that he receives from his father. James Gunn said in the after show, and by the way, I love that all these shows have after shows now because I like the breakdowns of what we see in the episode. But he talked about how there's an unscripted moment with Robert Patrick and John Cena in that particular scene where, after they've been, cracking up and sharing tales over a beer, Augie gets up and he's going to go to bed and he's like, I love you guys. I love you too, son. Like something, I love you too, buddy. And he like grabs his ear, tugs at his ear like lovingly. And James Gunn talked about how that is like the most love that like Peacemaker has ever received from his father ever, or maybe anyone ever, because he's just not used to that. His father was a racist piece of shit in his universe, and now his father is a loving, caring individual that actually values him in this universe, and his brother is alive and also cares for him in this universe. And he gets emotional when they both leave the room and he's just there, right? And he tells his brother, he's like, I love you. And he's like, oh, you drunken asshole, I love you too. And then they leave and he just starts crying, and it's like, I get it. Like, you can understand, like, the emotional turmoil that he's been through, like, all the way through from season one. You find out what his personal life is. This is such a flip for him. The idea that there is a universe out there where he had everything that he was missing in his own universe. And, you can already see where this is going to go. And I know if you saw the trailers, if you saw, like, any of the lead-ins and spots for it, you're like, okay, we know where this is headed. And you could even predict what was going to happen with respect to how this episode ended, because of course it's a case where he's in somebody else's, like, he's in another Peacemaker's universe. So naturally, there's going to be a conflict between him and the other Peacemaker, and it's going to wind up with the other Peacemaker dying at his hands. And that's exactly what happens. And to me, I thought it was going to happen inside the universe. No, it actually happened in, the dimensional gateway, if you will, by accident, because this dude had, like, the razors coming out of his mask and had the rocket pack, and of course he hits the rocket pack before he stabs him, and then, like, he gets impaled, and that's it. He's now killed, and Gunn brought this up too. He said he's killed his brother when he was younger, he killed his father when he was an adult, and now he's killed another version of himself. He's like, death follows him all the time, like, essentially. And that's how the episode ends. It's like, well, shit. All right. And saw that coming. So now you're looking for a scenario where he's going to be actively taking the place of that Peacemaker that he just killed. And he didn't necessarily mean to kill this dude. This dude popped in on him when he was admiring his room and all the stuff that he had and, like, the life that he wished he lived. And then the guy got the drop on him and was trying to kill him. And it was in self-defense that he ended up killing the other Peacemaker. And so now, yeah, he's in a mess. He's in a quandary. But how much of a mess is he going to feel like it is, considering how much better this universe is than the one that he currently lives in, than the actual DCU Prime that we're talking about here. So yeah, that was an interesting way to set up this very first episode for this season, and I like it. The only thing, obviously, that I wasn't real keen on was the orgy scene, and I still don't entirely understand how the orgy scene works. When he was snorting the coke, like, was that something? Was that like a special magical coke that he had in season one? I don't know. Whatever. I wasn't 100% certain that the orgy was real until Economos saw it when he was monitoring him, and I was like, oh, well, okay, I guess it is real. And yeah, it is graphic. There's full frontal from multiple guys in that particular sequence, and it's like, okay, I didn't need that personally. I didn't need it, not my thing, right? Regardless of whether it's men or women, I don't need that type of orgy. Not part of the episode that was my favorite. Not gonna rewind that. Just my own personal preference, but. Either way, it wasn't like it destroyed the episode for me. It was like, okay, well, he went further with it because it's a streaming show on HBO Max. He could do that. All right. Okay. They'll never air that, like, cleanly on a cable channel or anywhere else. Fine. It is what it is. And it's not like it's out of character for Peacemaker. It isn't out of character. It's completely in character for his thoughts and his sensibilities as an individual in this particular universe. So it wasn't off-brand, right? And I'm sure people looked at it like, oh, well, it was just in there for shock value. Well, yes, it was shock value, but it was also true to the character, true to how, messy this guy's character's free spirits and whatnots are, that he snorts coke and then an orgy forms in his home in that regard. And he doesn't even partake in it. He just disassociates and then goes back to the portal and just, kind of like, and high, like, completely off his rocker, just stumbles into the other universe in that regard. So yeah, other than that, I mean, look, all the irreverent humor, all the other stuff, I mean, that's all part of the show. That's what we've come to understand from it from the first season. But all the emotional moments and all the character building moments that are already established in this particular season, yeah, no, looking forward to those. Looking forward to the development of his arc, Peacemaker, that is. Looking forward to the development of Harcourt's arc and how the 11th Street kids are going to, evolve out of this. Also looking forward to further world building, because we've already had the table set already for certain details with respect to the DCU going forward, which James Gunn said was going to be the case. And now there's going to be more table setting throughout these episodes. And now, we made the connection, right? Even Flag talked about the Luther incident, right? And the Luther incident, like, he's using the whole, like, multi-dimensional room, he's using that as an excuse because he's basically comparing it to the pocket dimension that Lex used to nearly rip apart the planet as he was ripping apart Metropolis just to get Superman's attention. He's using that to say, oh, it's the same thing, we can't allow another incident like that to happen. But they make reference to the Superman movie, so there you have it. There's your Easter egg, there's your connection right? But it's also, again, not a homework problem because that's a connection that is made to Superman. But if you didn't see the movie, it doesn't matter. You just know that there was a Luthor incident and that Flag Sr. is using it as an excuse to say, no, we got to go after Peacemaker. We got to make certain that he doesn't do that again, right? You don't need details. You don't need further explanation. There's nothing. If you haven't seen Superman, you're not lost. You're perfectly fine with respect to the connection to Peacemaker season 2. You're also, you don't need Superman in order to know about the Justice Gang. It's explained. Maxwell Lord explains, I fund the Justice Gang. Hawk Girl and Green Lantern are part of the Justice Gang, right? He doesn't even need to mention Mr. Terrific or Metamorpho at this point. He could, but he doesn't need to, and maybe he will at some point later in this season. But the point is no homework problem so far. So for all the people, and I know there are many that are concerned that we will have just the same homework problem in the DCU as we've done, in the MCU. And us fans, that is, right? Because the general audience obviously could give less than two shits with respect to that. Couldn't give less than two shits in that regard. So, it is what it is. But I like the way that they've started this off. I like the way that the world building has begun, right? We've already seen the Easter eggs. We already know this is a DCU series. DCU. That has been established from moment one, DCU. And so I'm looking forward to the rest of it without question. All right, now let's talk about the fan discussion surrounding this episode because we got some bad faith bullshit narratives to destroy. And this all goes back to James Gunn, who, by the way, I mean, that man, the PR and just the work that he's been putting in so far with respect to the launch of the DCU has been phenomenal. Seriously, like Creature Commandos all the way through Superman and now into Peacemaker season 2. Man just does not sleep, right? And just continues the incredible PR effort, right? He does the podcast. Obviously, he's, recapped season 1 with his wife and other cast members, and he's continuing it now. And they've got the mini doc at the end of each episode, which, that's something that they also did with the Batman, with Lauren LaFranc and people involved, and Matt Reeves as well for that particular series. It's just a thing that they're doing now, and it's great. It's awesome. But on top of that, there's the social media presence, and that's always the iffy part, right? People are always kind of divided a little bit with respect to what James Gunn says on social media, but he's got some awesome responses here that I definitely want to get to. And here's the big one, because he was asked plenty of questions. Now, he posted the opening credits for season 2, which they're cool. I mean, I don't think they're quite as surprising. It's one of those things where when you watch the first one, you see the cast and crew, and of course it's probably going to change as the season goes on, just like it did in season 1. And I don't necessarily like or dislike the song anymore. I mean, they made it a more elaborate dance number. It's cool. It's and they're Tim Meadows' character we haven't met yet. Obviously, it wasn't in this first episode, and we've got other characters that we're going to meet and that we're going to see in that regard, right? At one point, I saw Michael Rooker in this, and I forget who he's going to play. In fact, I don't even really know. Or maybe I did know and I forgot. But either way, we're going to see him, and we're going to see others that are in this dance number to open the sequence or to open the show later on. But either way, Jeremiah 2882 asked him, hey, Mr. Gunn, so the guy that's funding the Justice Gang is Maxwell Lord. Isn't that character a villain in the comics? And James Gunn's answer, a lot of people have appreciated with respect to what he's doing with Maxwell Lord in this iteration in the DCU. He says, quote, Max was retconned as sort of a muscular evildoer after originally being conceived by J.M. DeMatteis as a multi-layered character who was morally gray. Along with skinny Amanda Waller, it wasn't one of my favorite comic reimaginings. Our Max is inspired by the original version, so don't be waiting for him to shoot Blue Beetle in the face. There's two things that I love about this response. One, I like that, again, he's showing that he's, a fan of the original characters. He's going back to the roots with respect to a character like Maxwell Lord. So no, Maxwell Lord, played by his brother Sean, is not going to be a villain in the DCU. He's going to be a morally great character. And two, that last line of, so don't be waiting for him to shoot Blue Beetle in the face. Clearly that's something that occurs that I'm not aware of out of the comics. But again, it just proves and shows the comic lorist that James Gunn is, the dedication and appreciation of the source material that he's always displayed and demonstrated from the beginning, all the way back to, his development of the Suicide Squad movie. I have always appreciated that, and to have this studio creatively in the hands of someone who loves and respects and appreciates the source material and the source creators as much as he does is phenomenal so far. I mean, it's really good, and it's one of the best aspects I think the DC Studios has going for it right now. And truthfully, I really think you'd be hard pressed to find another aspect that is more important, at least for us fans, in that regard. But it is also great that he understands the balance between, the fans and, what he's got to do to entice the general audience in that regard. So that's one of the big things that he responded to. But there's more than a few things that he responded to in this regard that I do want to talk about. Enfall75 on Threads asked him this question. He says, I downloaded the Threads app just to pose this question. Are we just supposed to accept the fact that Rick Flag Sr. and Jr. are pretty much the same age? That aside, I'm loving the DCU so far. And Gunn says, they're like 17 years apart in real life. They're supposed to be 18 years apart on the show. So the age difference between Frank Grillo and Joel Kinnaman is bigger than I thought. Wow, really? Yeah, Frank Grillo is 60 and Joel Kinnaman is 45. Wow. So, yeah, they're not the same age. That's 15 years. It's not quite 17 years. Maybe there's a half year in there. Maybe it's like 16 because of where their birthdays line up. But either way, yeah, that's still quite plausible in that regard. So, yes, we can accept that, or at least we should accept that. Now, I know we all feel a particular way about Gunn responding to assholes, but I like this particular response because this individual said, you simultaneously make a movie that's super inspiring and encourages people to do good, and a TV show in the same universe that's super perverted, morally bankrupt, and encourages people to do bad. Crazy. Gunn says, in no way do I think Peacemaker is any less about finding our own humanity than Superman is. They're simply different people on different journeys, and the stories are aimed at different age groups. Bingo. Anybody comparing Peacemaker and Superman as characters is an idiot. Like, seriously, like, how do you do that? Like, you really have to be reaching for nonsense in order to do that. And that's just one of the bad faith arguments. And I'm going to get to the big one here in a little bit when I'm going through each of his comments in this regard, right? Like, for example, this is a faceless one. He didn't need to respond to this, but guy goes, please tell me it's Vigilante in the suit and not a stunt double. He gets no special privilege, and he misspelled privilege. So this is a bot. Yeah, this has got to be a bot. No avatar, 114 followers, whatever. But Gunn responded anyway and said, yeah, it's Freddy in the suit. Fair enough. And then someone asked him why wasn't Crypto included in the Justice Gang cameo, to which Gunn responded, no way they're trusting that dog to stop an alien invasion. Yeah, true. Especially if Kara and Clark were there, like if they were both there, then there's no way that they were going to not leave Crypto at home. Crypto was probably at the fortress being monitored by Gary and the other Superman robots for sure. But here we go. Let's get to the big one. We're going to dispel the big, huge retcon narrative, right? Because that's the big thing coming out in these discussions is, oh, he's completely retconned and destroyed the DCEU. It's over, Snyder cult. Yeah, whatever. DC Curiosity, and this may have even been another bot. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is a bot. DC Curiosity has 1 follower and no profile picture. This is a bot. But here's the question that they tagged James Gunn in. They said, hey, James Gunn, Peacemaker Episode 1 effing ruled. Of course, fans are bickering online about the Justice League Justice Gang switch-up, claiming that you've erased the DCEU's Justice League and therefore that series of films from existence. So, like, did the Flash film reset the DCEU and create the DCU? Or is the correct interpretation that the DCEU is simply off elsewhere in the multiverse, and now we're simply following the DCU, with the two universes merely sharing similarities? Gunn's comprehensive answer is, haha, oh boy, none of these things really exist, so it's obvious I didn't erase any films from existence, number one. Then he says, but if one really wants to pretend it's all real, the second is closer. You could say that there are infinite amount of timelines and the DCU timeline is almost exactly the same as the Peacemaker Season 1 timeline with very, very minor differences. I mean, I think it's fair to say a lot of aspects of Season 1 fit in even less with the DCEU than the DCU, so Season 1 is kind of an outlier to begin with. There it is, people. There's your answer. From the man himself, from the creative genius, there has been no retcon of the DCEU whatsoever. The DCEU exists somewhere else in the multiverse, right? There's nothing that's been erased. There's nothing that can take away the DCEU, no matter what the anti-Snyder cult wants to believe. And there's other stuff, like they elaborate on this further, because after Gunn gave this answer, which was only a couple of hours ago that he posted this, so I'm glad I really get to talk about it here. I'm glad he posted this. Like, this goes further as far as the discussion. But again, any one of us paying attention should have known this is what it is, especially when the Saga Cell said previously in the DCU, not previously in the DCEU, previously in the DCU. So we saw the DCU version of what happened at the end of season 1, not the DCEU version. We saw the DCEU version first when we watched season 1, and we just saw the DCU version now, right? So for people who can't, fans that claim they can't wrap their head around that, yeah, they can. And the general audience couldn't care less. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if a general audience member that watched Peacemaker season 1 doesn't even remember. And they might be thinking, oh, wow, he put them in there back then? And then you have to explain to them no, and they're like, oh, okay, and then they don't care anymore. It is what it is, because they're in DCU mode now, which is what we should all be in, DCU mode. And I think we are, except for the anti-Snyder cultists who just have to get their shots in. And they're worried far more about the Snyderverse being dead than anyone else is on this earth. No one is keeping it alive more than anti-Snyder cultists at this point in time. But this goes further, because Eduzito23, let's see, is this one another bot? Yep, another bot, 0 followers. and a cartoon, what is this, Ben 10? I don't know who that is as an avatar. But he says, James, why don't you just re-release the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker Season 1 on HBO Max with minor edits? Isn't that much more easy? To which Gunn replied, that would be millions of dollars of work for something only a very, very, very small minority care about. I'd rather spend that money on new stories. Thank you. Thank you, James Gunn, because, one more time, for the cheap seats, the fans that even remotely give two shits about canon are literally like a small section of the 5 to 10% of the audience that all of us take up if we're lucky. The 90 to 95% of people watching this stuff could not care less. There is no need to spend dollars. There's no need to spend time and effort doing that shit. If you can't simply watch the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker Season 1 and understand that they're in the DCEU and that the DCU version of those stories is slightly different, like he's been saying from the beginning, that's a you problem. I can do that. And I imagine many others can do that. You're just stubborn and you're just lazy. And not necessarily anybody listening here, but the people who have such a problem with this are just stubborn and lazy and don't want, to have to do the work themselves, even though it's not even really doing the work themselves. Gunn is telling you exactly what the case is. You just have to accept it. And if you want to be a child and not accept it and throw a tantrum about it, that's your business. You won't be missed. The rest of us will continue forward like rational adults with respect to this. But here's the part where my enthusiasm gets a little overboard, and I know that I'm setting myself up for a potential fall because I'm probably more excited about this than I should be. But legit_kit, which is another bot, at least it looks like it, 4 followers from this individual who claims to have a real name, and maybe this is a real picture of a person, I don't know. But this person asks him, do you feel like the Suicide Squad is a bit more flexible with canon than Peacemaker Season 1, since you've used a couple of actors from that movie for different roles in the DCU? And Gunn's simple one-word response is yes. Now, if I really wanted to extrapolate on this, I could say that, well, he gave a one-word answer because he doesn't want to give anything away. He doesn't want to give any examples of who he's used so far or who he might use down the road, including perhaps a certain court jester, a certain female court jester. I know. I'm getting my hopes up. I know I am. I get it. I'm getting too excited at the possibility of it, and it's not my call. It's his call. He is in charge, and I will respect whatever decision he makes as the creative boss of DC Studios. I just love the fact that the door is open, and he refuses to shut it. He refuses to close that door. And he may end up slamming it shut by the time this season is over or afterwards. He may do that. He may very well do that. And he's within his rights to do that. And the disappointment will be my own fault if that is the case. I have nothing to blame him for. I am a responsible fan. Someone that is accountable for my own emotions and isn't willing to blame a director or a writer for how I feel because I'm the one choosing to feel that way in that regard. You know what I mean? So whatever decision he makes, cool. But this goes into what I was saying earlier about how the Suicide Squad exists at a point in the DCEU where the original plan was so far gone and the direction of the franchise was so aimless under Walter Hamada that really anything James Gunn did, he can do whatever he wants. He's not beholden to anything. The biggest thing that he has to get rid of is the Justice League, and he's already done that. He's already established that the Justice Gang is in the DCU and we don't have a Justice League yet. So that's the biggest thing, truthfully, as far as canon is concerned. Everything else, he can go to town on. He can do whatever. And I know I saw somebody posting about the whole Bloodsport shooting Superman with a kryptonite bullet. No, he doesn't have to explain that. He could, but he doesn't have to, right? Like, someone could probably make a joke about, like, if he does end up bringing Idris back. He said this. He said at a press like a week ago during the premiere that he would love to find a way to bring Bloodsport back. If he brings Idris back, one, he better bring Margot back if he's going to bring Idris back, in my humble opinion. But if he brings Idris back, they can make a joke about it and, whatever, but it doesn't have to be. That can absolutely be a DCEU event, obviously. Come on, because if Superman didn't lose his first battle until the Hammer of Baravia defeated him 3 minutes before we first saw him in Superman, spoilers for people who haven't seen that movie yet, it's been over a month, but if he hasn't, if that was the first battle that he lost, then when would Bloodsport have had time to shoot him with a kryptonite bullet? Unless that event is actually going to happen, and maybe that's how Bloodsport gets into the DCU. Maybe that occurs, right? How about that? Maybe Idris shoots David Cornsweet. Right? Like, maybe that occurs, right? Maybe that's part of a plot later on in the Superman saga. That could happen. That could be the way in. I'd like that. That would be cool if we see that occur, right? I know the people that hated it are not going to like it, but we'll see. I mean, if he put it in the Suicide Squad, he could just as easily show it to us in the DCU now, couldn't he? That'd be great. That would be awesome. But either way. The one other thing that he responded to earlier today was this appears to be a real individual, an Irish BGS who has like over almost 700 followers, right? This appears to be a real person who said, James Gunn, this is strictly out of curiosity, not criticism. And if you've already answered this, apologies. Okay, that already sounds better than a bot question. He asks, since you showed Batman's silhouette in Creature Commandos, was there a particular reason the same wasn't done for the Peacemaker Season 2 scene? Or was it just a case of, I didn't want to? And he put a laughing emoji and a prayer emoji. And Gunn said, he's not associated with the Justice Gang. And so there's that answer, like, okay, no, there's no reason for Batman to be there because he's not associated with the Justice Gang. Whereas we've already established that Superman and by proxy Supergirl were involved with the Justice Gang at some point. But then the Jeans report, now, is this a bot? Maybe it says a podcast covering sports, movies, and more, 160 followers, so maybe not. But the Jeans report asked, will he ever be, with a couple of eye emojis, and all James Gunn responded with was a thinking emoji. Now, here's the deal. A lot of people are speculating, and this is probably true, those who are familiar with the Justice League International, which Sci-Fi Center, William from Sci-Fi Center, and also Scott, my podcast brother from my Squadcast Media days, they've talked about how James Gunn is favoring the Justice League International setup because of who is involved in the Justice Gang already and the whole, like, Maxwell Lord corporate structure. I'm guessing that's what I haven't read Justice League International. I'm pretty sure that Justice League International is probably in the pile of books that Scott has sent me over the years that I just haven't read yet. And I can either read them physically or I can, get my DC Universe subscription and read them there, one way or the other. But there's been indications that that's where this is headed, that we're going to get a Justice League International, and that, while it may not have been the most popular incarnation of the Justice League, it seems to be one that James Gunn favors, right? So perhaps that's what the thinking emoji is about. Like, not the Justice Gang per se, but a Justice League that will be formed out of the Justice Gang when we get to Batman and when we get to Wonder Woman, since we know that those movies are in development. We already know the script is being written by Anna Nogueira for Wonder Woman, and we're waiting to see further developments on the Batman Brave and the Bold film at some point, which we're probably at least a couple years away from in terms of development and whatnot. So that's perhaps why he responded with the thinking emoji, as if to say, well, not now, but maybe, right? And stay tuned with respect to that development, right? So clearly there's some Justice League formation that he has in the works, which, I think he's already said and admitted that. But yeah, for sure. And this is one of those cases, like I've said from the beginning, that I am glad that he responds, even to some of the troll answers, like literally the big answer where he eliminated this bullshit about, the DCEU being retconned and erased came from what I'm pretty sure is a bot. He responded to a bot question and gave us a definitive answer, shutting down all the anti-Snyder cultists that want to try and rub this in the face of Snyder fans who don't give a shit at this point. Snyder fans couldn't care less. Snyder fans have already disassociated or they've moved on, period. So there's nothing that you can say to them. And trying to enrage Snyder cultists, no, that's what they want. They want your attention, so you're giving them more of what they want. if that's in fact what you're trying to do. And it's a never-ending cycle of bullshit between, two cults that the rest of us really just don't need to deal with. So bad faith actors on either side, just block and move on, ignore them, while we continue to enjoy, those of us that are enjoying the DCU, we get to enjoy the rest of the world building and the future direction that Peacemaker and Supergirl and the Superman saga and Clayface and everything else is taking us on going forward, for sure. So we'll see if Gunn responds to more stuff after each episode like he did for this particular one. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. If so, and if he has any other big answers for some other big things that, that try to drive the conversation for this particular show, I'll talk about those as well. But yeah, really glad that he did that, and really glad that we can extrapolate on that and kill some of these bad faith fan narratives one episode in to an 8-episode second season. And that is going to do it for this episode of Flight Box, talking about Peacemaker Season 2, Episode 1, The Ties That Grind. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Thank you so much for supporting the Flightcast. And remember, the future episodes of Flight Box, we will be talking about this show weekly, except for 1 week. There's 1 week that I'm not going to actually get to talk about it. We'll have to cover 2 episodes in one shot, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. It'll be somewhere around week 4 or 5, if I'm not mistaken. But all the weekly shows will be on Saturdays with respect to this particular show, and then other episodes of Flightbox or Flight Alert or whatever else, those will be on Thursdays, just to let you know the schedule going forward for this particular series. But if you've got thoughts with respect to Peacemaker Season 2 and what you thought about it, if you haven't already sent your emails in for this week on Flight Chat, you know where to find me on Threads and on Instagram at the Flightcast, on BLUESKY at Flightcast. You can comment on the posting for this particular episode on the Flightcast YouTube page. There's also the Flightcast Facebook page, and of course I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care, stay safe out there, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.